that ordinance that he was referring to went through the planning commission, so.
Of which he was chair at the time.
We still have it. Right.
Cliff still in? Where's Cliff?
Yeah.
Okay, here we go.
Well, it adds to the cost. Yeah, it adds.
Or Mr. More water.
That's pretty good.
That's some more water.
Okay, thanks.
That's good. So, bring that in, drink it.
Yeah, there.
Okay, Sherry, ready? Okay, if we could reconvene, please. So we agreed that we take item B under new business first, and that has to do with initiating a planning process, recology. And John, you want to start us off?
Yes, thank you, Honorable Mayor, members of the council. You have in front of you a request from Recology to initiate a planning process for their proposed expansion project, independent from the ongoing Baylands process that's underway. Again, just real quick background. The Recology expansion project is an element of a land use plan that is being evaluated in the just released environmental impact report for the Baylands. It involves expanding Recology's facility by about 24 acres in the southerly, on the site just south of their current facility. And in the attached letter, they're requesting that the city initiate a planning process so they can proceed independently of the larger Baylands project. And primarily related to some timing issues they have with some of their needs to meet their franchise agreement with San Francisco and help San Francisco achieve their zero waste or 100% landfill waste diversion goals by 2020, which does require the expansion and modernization of the Brisbane facility. So there are a number of timing and scheduling issues that do come up with this sort of request. Again, if the project were tied to the Baylands as a larger project, that component, the Recology expansion, couldn't proceed until such time as the Baylands final EIR is certified and a specific plan is approved for the Baylands. I think, as we're all aware, there are some substantial time and community effort that's going to be involved in that process, and it's not really chronologically driven at this point to get approval of the larger Baylands project. Recology does have some unique timing constraints, so certainly we can't understand that indeterminate time schedule that the Baylands process is on may not meet their business requirements and their planning needs. So the idea that they could go through a process and get an idea and an answer whether or not they're going to be allowed to expand in Brisbane in a more timely way than might be achieved otherwise is I think a reasonable request on their part. Also believe that again is their ability to proceed independently is both legally and procedurally acceptable. Legally, again, the requests that they're asking the city to initiate relate to legislative acts, amending the general plan, rezoning property, initiating a specific plan. Those are all under the city's authority to initiate those kind of actions. Again, the only action the council would be taking is to initiate a process. There's no guarantee of what that outcome of that process will be. It'll have to go through its own public hearing process, independent environmental review. So again, by initiating a process does not predetermine what the outcome would be. And I think that's, again, another important point. The request is to initiate something. Lastly, from an environmental review perspective, there isn't a problem with starting a standalone environmental review of the Recology expansion project that doesn't taint or somehow harm the current Baylands EIR process that's underway. It'll have its own process and its own opportunities for public review. And taking this action independently won't influence that at all. All it will do is that if the Recology expansion project does move forward, that would be the subject of its own independent environmental review. So there, again, be an opportunity for public review of that project, and even on a more focused and concentrated basis than it being considered as part of a larger 500-plus acre specific plan. So it may actually provide a better opportunity for public focus and review of that particular component. Should the council choose to approve Recology's request, there are a number of actions that are also recommended this evening. Recommended that Recology be responsible for all processing costs associated with the city's planning and environmental review processes. And there's an attached agreement to pay processing costs, which should be executed if, again, that's the council's direction. As noted, there will be a standalone environmental document required, which would be an environmental impact report for the Recology expansion. And it would be appropriate for the city to engage ESA, the consultant who's prepared the draft EIR for the Baylands, to undertake that study. Again, they've done much of the work. Much of the work from that Baylands EIR will be used to bolster and support a standalone environmental document for Recology. So we'd recommend that the city be directed to negotiate a consultant agreement for ESA to perform that scope of work. Lastly, Recology, the site straddles the San Francisco-Brisbane border, and it raises the issue of who will serve as the lead agency under CEQA. Under CEQA, when you have potentially overlapping jurisdictions, one agency is designated as the lead for CEQA purposes, and the other is designated a responsible agency. In this case, since most of the expansion is going to occur within Brisbane, we feel it's appropriate that Brisbane be designated the lead agency for this CEQA activity, and that San Francisco serve as a responsible agency. There's been some preliminary discussions with San Francisco that they concur with that approach, but we're recommending that the staff be authorized to negotiate a memorandum of understanding to formalize and codify that particular understanding, and that would come back to council when you're back in session in August, we anticipate, so to adopt that formally. So with that, staff is recommending that the council approve Recology's request and take the other recommendations as set forth in the staff report. That conclude my comments.
Okay. Thank you, John. There are representatives here this evening from Recology, and they would like to make a presentation, but before they get up and begin, it's evident that we're not going to be able to complete our agenda this evening. And so I just wanted to make sure we're okay as a council. We will try to complete all of the new business, and then we'll try to do the one issue under old business. And that would be all we would try to complete this evening, and everything else would be put on to our next, now new council meeting, which is scheduled for a week from tonight, June 24th. That's okay with everybody?
I think
It's okay.
That's appropriate.
Okay.
And you wanted to include the old business?
Yes, because the person making that staff report will not be here next week.
Okay.
Okay? Please.
Honorable Mayor and council members, I'm John Glaub from Recology, and I would like to thank you for your consideration of this item to initiate an independent planning and environmental review process for Recology's zero waste facilities project. We have our lead architect and planner here with us tonight to give a very brief overview. I know the hour is late, but we have some visual depictions of what the site looks like now and what the vision is for this project in the future. So I'd like to proceed with that in quick order. David? You're all set?
Hi. Mr. Mayor, council members,
How you doing?
thank you very much, and thank you, staff. My name is David Johnson. I'm with William McDonough & Partners. I've had the opportunity to meet with most or all of you a couple of times. I wanted to especially thank staff for the communication that's been excellent and working with us, and for all the comments through this period. So we didn't bring a long show, just a couple of slides. I think you've seen most of them, but we thought it might be helpful for some people who have not seen the presentation or be able to participate in anything. So this is the site that we're talking about. Of course, it's you all know the site well. And early on in a visioning period of the project, we set master plan objectives. You know, clearly, there's some buildings out there that have simply lived their lives. They're over 50 years old. We might have to refresh that now. It might be 60 years old now. And the services that are in the roadway frequently break down. So there's some work that needs to be done. Their primary client, that's very important for their business, their headquarters is in San Francisco, has called for them to achieve zero waste in the short term. And so that's one of the goals of the project. We also want to anticipate change, because these systems are changing rapidly. And so the master plan that we've put forward anticipates changing systems over time. So that we want to build a building that's going to be able to anticipate change over time. Very dynamic system, very dynamic thing we're dealing with here. Sorry that the text is off. Elimination of the very concept of waste, where we want to value the materials as nutrients rather than thinking of them as waste. We want to demonstrate restorative and regenerative practices. And there was a statement earlier tonight that EPA made the point that you guys are trying to create a replicable model. It's something that we're going to try to do here. San Francisco provides leadership globally on this topic, and the facility that we're talking about here would be one that many cities would learn from. I'm not going to read each one of these, but clearly we are seeking to make a very high performance building that's going to address a need over a very long period of time. And that we need to do without any interruption to their core business, which is going to be a challenge, of course. So as you know, published last week is the variant that we are part of, and it's shown here. I'm sure you haven't gotten through that document yet, and we look forward to the sessions coming up. And then, so I'm not going to go into that. And then we have shared with the community a vision for what the project is, working within the principles of the Baylands Plan, and zoning the project in such a way that will be safe and productive, and even to include a long-range vision of a BRT if it is so to be on site. So I really didn't want to go into many details tonight. I think that the matter before you is a procedural one, but we did want to just have the opportunity to refresh on our plans here.
Yeah, I do have one question, David. I really like the concept. I think it looks great. When we've had some meetings in the past, and just looking at this picture here, it appears that you're going to replace all the buildings before you were thinking of keeping some.
Yeah, there's the two large buildings that are built most recently, which is the transfer station, the existing transfer station, and the C&D, where the construction material is brought in and sorted. Those are going to stay.
Okay.
And we anticipate that the transfer building may actually have a small wing built in the short term that we're working out with the city of San Francisco. That'll be to bring to scale some of the processes that the company's been testing in smaller cases. So we're actually working slowly towards bringing these technologies up to scale.
Okay.
But you're right. There's frankly many of the buildings there just need to go, except for the more recent buildings, which we think have value for some time.
Sure. I mean, you just look at it. I mean, I think it looks beautiful. And, you know, like you're talking about setting standards. You know, if this, you know, you go through the process, right, which is starting right now with the process, you know, to initiate, you know, moving forward with having a separate EIR, you know, for ecology. But, you know, you look at the buildings, and I know that you're planning to make them like LEED platinum.
Yeah, our goal is to be LEED platinum with the project.
Yeah, I mean, you know, so it's like, yeah, you know, I mean, that I think is good opportunity. So thanks for presenting that.
Yeah, and I just, in your staff report, staff included a very early estimate of the types of studies that will be undertaken, and I think that's an indicator of that we're just beginning, and that this obviously needs to be studied, and it's going to be good to do that with you.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good day.
Well, you know, I actually had an inquiry from a couple of citizens last week and said, is the council considering bringing more garbage into Brisbane? We're going to start dumping again or burning?
Yeah.
And, well, no, that's not what it is, but, you know, really we're looking at doing with your project what's termed an anaerobic digester, which converts organic material into compost. Is that correct?
Yeah, so what will be studied through the CEQA process is the processes that we anticipate on the project. And there is no incineration that's anticipated. There is no burying of garbage that's anticipated. We really want to eliminate the need to send the material to a landfill to be buried. The conversion of organic material to a resource that can be recovered, water, energy, and soil, is an intention of the plan, and that will probably be through anaerobic digestion. Yes.
Okay.
You know, I'm kind of curious, how much material do you think that will come through the facility, you know, if in what you envision here?
I'm sorry, I really don't have the number off the top of my head. I could, do you, John?
We're designing it for about 20% growth from where we have been at a steady state recently. Actually, the steady state just before the economic downturn, so about 20% growth from that. Because these are going to be,
Over the lifetime of the project?
yes, yeah. So
Okay.
that's kind of, it's pretty much about all the existing, well, all the existing vehicles that use the site, that traffic won't change, only for the amount of growth that I just quoted. Because all those vehicles come to this site now, even though some of them actually park at another corporation yard on 7th and Berry. But they all come here because that's just a corporation yard for the company we call Golden Gate. But all those trucks come here every day, and they would continue, but it would be all nice and efficient in one place.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks.
We'll come back with the breakdown of the material that's anticipated.
Oh, yeah. I'm sure
Yeah.
that'll be part of the.
There's a lot of
process,
details
yeah.
for us to work out.
Yeah.
Terry?
Anything else?
You said that you anticipated a BRT.
Yeah, so.
What is a BRT?
Okay, there, in the image, there's an elevated bus rapid transit. I'm sorry to have used the acronym, BRT. And there's, in the CEQA document and in other planning documents, Randy's been part of this, there are a number of alignments that are studied. Some would be on Geneva, in the middle, or on the side. There's another alignment that may be underground, and there's an alignment that would be above ground. And so you may be able to see the buses there in front of the building on that elevated roadway. That is a version of the BRT that is one of the most onerous for us in our planning. But, so we chose that one, and to make it work for the plan. So the other BRT alignments influence our plan least, or less, sorry, it's late. So we just for planning purposes, we chose the worst case.
And then as you're, as you're going through the possible EIR program, how does that affect when when the overall site hasn't been looked at yet? You know, the elevated roadway, the Geneva extension. I mean, how does that affect how we look at the project?
I think staff said it appropriately, is that we think that it's going to be easier to assess these projects separately on separate timescales. We're adopting the transportation principles and the planning principles of the Baylands specific plan. We aren't going against them. We are suggesting a different alignment of Geneva and some traffic movements that are a little bit different. We need to study those. But it's time to study this project independently, because we anticipate that the Bayland specific plan could be going on for some time. And actually, I think that the fact that the draft EIR is out now and we're using the same consultants, I think it's going to help us. But both of the projects will have to have a defensible CEQA document. So I think staff said appropriately that this is going to allow all of us in the public to focus on this project rather than the larger project. This represents about 5% of the overall Baylands plan.
But you're right, Terry. I mean, you know, how does this project affect the multimodal station? You know, I mean, where it's currently configured. You know, how does it work with Geneva? And, you know, are there opportunities for the Recology project in regards to handling our own waste? You know, so, but we'll get there. But, yeah.
Mr. Mayor, I think Councilwoman O'Connell's question was really a good one and an important one. I'd like to have our Community Development Director respond to it.
Is there anything else of me? I'm happy to stay up here if you want me to.
You can sit down and relax, and
Okay.
we'll see.
Okay.
In terms of the context of sort of the larger Baylands development and how this project may or may not fit, to recall or remember that the community proposed plan currently includes a variant, which includes Recology. So the draft EIR as currently published does analyze a proposal to expand Recology in the context of the larger site development. So that information is still available. That information can be commented on. It can be useful as a more independent and focused planning and environmental review program occurs for this particular component, if that's the council's direction. And we would expect that much of the information that will form the environmental document will be extracted from that EIR in terms of the cumulative impacts in the context of roadway alignments and multimodal facilities. Those are all addressed at some level in the draft EIR that's already been published.
So then for you, John, you also had called this an EIR, or Environmental Impact Review, and an Environmental Impact Report. And I'm just trying to be clarified on what type of document that you're talking about and how that affects the already published draft EIR.
My apologies for using maybe the terms interchangeably. The expectation, the direction we're moving forward with a standalone Recology project would be a standalone environmental impact report. So So that would be the form of environmental documentation we assume for this particular proposal if it moves forward. And again, in terms of the implications on the draft EIR that has already been published, that's a standalone document. There will be comments made on it to the point of, to take that to a final EIR. But we think this document will be, they'll both stand alone independently. The council will have the ability to certify each EIR independently when you get to that point, whenever that point is for these various projects. And, we'll be extracting information from this currently published document to support that standalone analysis.
We will as a city, or we will as a consultant be extrapolating the data?
The consultant will prepare the document similar to they would with any other draft EIR. The council, the city will make the determinations as to its legal adequacy and certify the document. So that's always going to be the city's responsibility. The consultant will be under contract to the city, but again, it's ultimately the council's decision to certify.
I have a couple of questions, too. Would it be correct to say that the overall Baylands draft EIR is a program EIR, whereas the Recology eventually will be producing an EIR which is more comparable to a project EIR?
The first part of your question is absolutely correct. The Baylands EIR is a programmatic EIR. Whether or not this standalone document is programmatic in nature or a project-based document, I think is still to be sorted through. Some of it's going to depend on the level of information and detail that the applicant is going to be able to provide regarding future use of their property, the proposed future use of the property. To the extent that that can be very precisely defined, then a project EIR is the more likely tool. To the extent that there may need to be some decisions, programming decisions that might have environmental implications in terms of how the buildings are used, that may lend itself to more of a programmatic analysis. And again, until we really got some authorization to the council to proceed, we haven't gone into very far into the details as to what the actual precise form of a specific plan that the applicant may move forward with at this particular point. So I hate to hedge at this point, but I'm not sure based on the information.
You're doing a pretty good job.
But we'll have to see based on what they ultimately submit.
Okay, so that's something we are going to collaborate on over time and see what makes the most sense eventually. Yes?
Defined very early on in terms of before the contract is let, so that will be defined as part of the contract with the consultant. They're preparing a programmatic EIR or a project EIR. So when that negotiation is complete, it's not something that'll be deferred, 6 months or a year down the line. We'll know.
Okay, sooner rather than later?
Exactly.
Okay, that's good. Second question, you have a list here of things that the Recology EIR, I take it, would study in more detail appropriate to their particular site and project. But one of the things that, and this is kind of a question, that, they're talking about air quality and biological, cultural, traffic and so forth. But what I don't see on here, and that's maybe something that's going to be adequately studied in the draft EIR for the Baylands or not, is discussion of the soils themselves and the toxic contamination, if any exists there. If there is, then how's that going to be mitigated in order to have people working there, and and also the whole issue of earthquake, because we're talking about a landfill. Anyway, none of that seems to be listed here, and that That's surprising to me, because it would seem to me that's pretty important stuff to look into.
Yeah, that's a great point. And again, this is a very preliminary scope of work, but what it points out, and maybe the audience is a little different, what this was intended to portray is work that is going to be independent technical work that's done by the EIR consultant. They're going to perform a traffic study. They're going to perform air quality analysis, et cetera, et cetera. Typically, they don't generate a lot of new data in regards to hazards and geotechnical. And they'll summarize, they'll peer review information that's there, they'll analyze it, they'll include it in the EIR, but they don't do standalone new technical documents. So that's what that list of documents was. Studies were ones that the consultant would be independently responsible for doing. There's a whole subset of items on task 3, and there's about $160,000 budget. That would be basically the budget for actually taking other components that they're going to be doing peer review and analyzing data and still drawing CEQA conclusions that would be used by the council, but it wouldn't be them doing new technical work.
I hear your answer. I'm not totally satisfied with it, but I hope we can continue to talk about that. And then I have a question on the agreement that we've been asked to approve. This is on page 3. This is for the lawyer, our newest city attorney. Miscellaneous provisions, cost of suit, and it talks about in the event legal action between the parties shall become necessary, blah, 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 and so forth, and who pays and so forth. But it says only legal action between the parties. What about if there's a third-party suit?
Mayor, because this agreement is only between Recology and the city, the provision is designed to cover the cost of suit between the parties. If there was a third-party suit, it would depend on the type of suit and whether there was a statutory basis for fee recovery. If it was a CEQA challenge by a third party, then there generally is fee recovery for one side, not necessarily for the city. So the third-party issues would not be part of this contract, because this, again, is designed to cover only the relationship between the consultant and the city.
And you're comfortable that this is the way it should be?
Yes, for this type of, for initiating this type of an environmental review and the contract for the EIR, this is the appropriate document.
Okay. Thank you.
I have a question for staff.
Sure.
So, John, you talked about, amending the general plan, and could you explain a little bit, why that is necessary, what we currently have in place for the Baylands? And
The expectation is that it would be wise, if indeed this project is going to move forward, that it would be appropriate to include all of the expanded Recology site under a single zoning subdistrict and general plan subdistrict, which would be the Beatty subdistrict. So you would actually expand the boundaries of the Beatty subdistrict to include all the property that's part of the expanded site. That would be the general plan amendment would actually redraw the boundary lines.
all right, and so the way that the general plan is set up right now, there aren't these sub-districts.
There is a sub-district, but it follows Recology's current property lines, so it doesn't contemplate or anticipate an expansion. So then what you end up with would be a facility, if you're doing a uniform facility that is now governed by 2 sets of general plan policies, 2 sets of zoning rules.
Sure.
That would be very problematic in the long run to kind of operate it or manage it, or from a policy standpoint.
Sure, so that makes sense to make it all uniform. Okay.
Dana, I had a request that you wanted to address this matter?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members. This Recology had made a presentation before the BBCAG, and we have the same concerns you do. One is about the potential of underground storage tanks that they call them UST for unidentified. I know there are one or two that have recently been taken out of properties in the immediate vicinity. But I think it's really important that we have adequate site descriptions, because one of the properties that was on Beatty Road was where they were dismantling cars for years and years and years and years and years. And earlier, Molly Burke had asked about, you know, how clean is it going to be and things like that, cleaned up to what level. And the ZZ, the woman from EPA, correctly stated that it'll be cleaned up to the level of your land use. And this land use is industrial. Land use in the past was industrial. And when the BBCAG was dealing with the leaks underneath the tank farm, we were told, we said, well, if you've got that volume of gasoline underground, it's going to be off-gassing. Aren't you going to protect the employees? And they said, no, it's not necessary because that's expected. It's an industrial use in an industrial area, and we're not going to clean it up into any higher standard and essentially not protect people. That's OSHA's job. That's not our job anymore. And I'm flabbergasted at the idea that we would be including more industrial uses out in Brisbane on the Baylands rather than reduce them, because in 1991, when GPA 191 was brought before the city, it was all about getting rid of the industrial uses so that the citizens would be protected of the exposure to the kinds of gases and things that go through the waste stream. It's hard for me to say I don't approve of this project because I still don't know. And when I read the proposed environmental consultant saying, absent a specific plan and detailed descriptions, which is where I sit too. I mean, I've seen a couple of pictures. I've heard comments from people that say, certainly what they're trying to do right near the railroad is going to impact people if they're on the other side. They definitely will be on the other side in San Francisco. And so really concerned about things that might look good on paper but will be absolutely awful to the communities, such as their household hazardous waste still being right up there in that corner that the people in Little Hollywood or, yeah, that's the neighborhood, will still be exposed to. We smell it when we go on the tours. You know, right now it's just a little shed. I think that they'll do a better job in the future with better buildings, but it's a lot of chemicals and processes that will potentially put people at risk. The other thing was, we were told that this won't be any change other than the 20% growth, but what I had read in here was that they're going to be consolidating some of their operations, and some of them are the operations out at Pier 42, is it? 96, anyway. India Basin, right?
It's their
Yeah.
recycling plant.
Yeah. Frankly, I think being able to put the recyclables on a barge and take them to their intended designation rather than having them carted back and forth on our roads. I don't know. Lately, I've been encountering a lot of traffic on 101, and I used to be able to figure out exactly, okay, it's going to be at Millbrae, it's going to be at, these different places, but when you start feeling backed up near Brisbane, you're going, okay, what are those traffic impacts? Anyway, I'm concerned about the mass and scale, because that's never anything that was considered in the BD sub-area. I know that the statement here says that this will allow for discussion of cumulative impacts. So you're saying the draft EIR that's been presented to the public doesn't really have an adequate discussion of cumulative impacts? That's pretty sad, in my opinion. And you mentioned that you're going to prepare an environmental impact report. I would assume that's preceded with an NOP, a notice of preparation. Okay, I didn't see that in your document. And I guess the last question is there, I didn't read the whole thing, I don't have the time to do this anymore, but is there an arrears agreement in here similar to Universal Paragon, who we found was owing the city thousands and thousands of dollars, or tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars on old fees? Is there that kind of clause in here? Because that shouldn't be allowed to happen anymore. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. I think there is a provision that if they get behind, then the processing stops in effect, right? Okay, Michelle?
Michelle Salmon, Brisbane resident. It seems to me that, Dana brings up some really good points, but I would assume that we would do all the regular processing that we would for any EIR, such as notification and scoping and everything else. And all of those issues will be addressed in that. And I think what's really the issue is pulling these two things apart so that they can take a different path or a different life cycle, a different time, because we are running out of time for garbage. And I think when it was really obvious to me when we had that no deposit, no return presentation of where we were and where we're going. And I was all very hopeful. I've sat through 2 very detailed presentations by Recology, and I'm very hopeful about where we're going because we do need to get to zero waste. But as Barbara Abel pointed out, it's taken us already 50 years to get this far. I think we need to accelerate that before the whole earth just implodes. And so I think that we need to do everything we can to address this issue. And yeah, it's San Francisco's garbage, but it's all of our garbage. It's everybody's problem. And this is an opportunity for some really innovative stuff going on here. And I think that we need to clear the way and help that happen. It's our responsibilities of citizens of planet Earth, and we have an opportunity to do that. And I think we should do everything we can to move forward in facilitating that without creating more damage and more danger and more problems. And who's better able to gauge that than Brisbane with all that we've been through? So I hope we take a step forward. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. That's just a thumbs up? Okay. Okay, so I think we're ready to act, yes?
I think so.
So as I understand it, let me check with John. It sounds as if we have 2 parts to this. One is to authorize the mayor to go ahead and sign the agreement. And 2 is to ask you to begin negotiations with ESA and with San Francisco.
Correct. And the overarching to approve the request of Recology to initiate this.
Initiate the planning process. Okay. So did somebody make that motion?
Okay.
I ask one more quick question.
Oh, sure, of course.
This draft EIR that is, well, I'll call it an EIR, that's going to be made, is it only using the information that's in the other DEIR? Because it comments in the production and the task about them based on technical studies and existing information as developed as part of the Baylands draft EIR. So
They will be doing independent work that's new. So they'll take information from the Baylands EIR, some of it they'll be able to reuse, some of it they'll have to do new work. That's the bottom line. And most of these topics that they've identified are topics that they've identified they're going to have to do new technical work to support this on a standalone basis. A lot of the time, because these technical studies that are done for the larger project aggregated the impacts of developing the entire 500-acre site. You aggregate when you do the traffic, you aggregate when you figure out the air quality impacts, for example. So they have to actually disaggregate it, pull it out, do an independent model just for this particular component. So there'll be new work done.
do we run the risk of, if there's new work done and say this project's EIR is certified before the other EIR is certified, does that create problems if the information is different?
I would say the clarification would be, as we go through a certification of whatever the second EIR is, assume it's the Baylands EIR, if there's any kind of discrepancies that arise through the analyses, that you have the opportunity to clean that up as part of the final EIR. So that's why you only have a draft EIR in either case for the Baylands. So that's really what the transition, the phase of getting from a draft to a final is to do any clarifications. I'm not anticipating those at this point, but they could come up and we would have to clarify those at that time.
There's several questions and comments that kind of weave together. Is that the Baylands specific plan is a program level EIR. And so some of the good comments that were raised by public, some of the concerns are going to be addressed in something that's trending towards a project level EIR. So what we intend to do here is to gain more detail than the Baylands specific plan program level EIR would ascertain. So I think there's an opportunity to get some of the answers and do the studies that we need to do, and we're going to develop more detail than we would have if we just would have stayed with the Baylands plan. So I think we're all working towards the same thing, actually.
Okay,
All right.
so,
So I'll make the motion that
Okay.
you mentioned.
okay, that John and I worked out together. I'm just trying to summarize what you recommended.
We just do it all in one motion then?
I think we can. Yeah.
Okay, second it.
Okay, Mr. Attorney, yeah.
That's fine, as long as the motion states all of the actions that need to be taken.
Okay,
Yes.
all right. We stipulated those before, and John confirmed. Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye. I have a question, Mr. Mayor.
Sure.
In light of the hour, maybe we could ask staff what absolutely needs to be done tonight and what doesn't.
Believe it or not, I was going to ask the same question. And I'm thinking that probably the only thing is the history, right?
That has to be done tonight?
Right.
Well, no.
Something else?
Yeah, both new business A and C are time sensitive.
But we have
that
to
correct?
complete C next week anyway, don't we? Okay, thank you very much.
Good night.
Any day, yes, sir.
Don't we, I mean, because the second part of it is we're not going to do the successor agency tonight.
I was anticipating that we would do both the successor agency for the bond, for their bond refinancing. So if we wait to do the bond refinancing, we do not have another oversight board meeting scheduled.
That's true.
So what we would need to do is reschedule an oversight board meeting for the 26th, if that was possible. because otherwise we're waiting until August for the council meeting, or potentially maybe waiting for July for the oversight board, giving the Department of Finance another 60 days from there. So as we push that back, we're pushing back when we'd be able to potentially do the refi, and then, the question is, how long will interest rates hold where they are?
That's right. You're on the oversight board.
Mm-hmm.
So, we got
So that's the question that deals with the bond refinancing.
Yeah, no, you're right.
The sooner we do it, the better.
Let's just do it. We're here right now.
Well, I say we put off the history book because I've got questions about that allocation. I mean, and that certainly does not have time.
Well, the problem is that Maria can't be here next week.
While she cannot be here, I've been involved with it, so I'll just take it.
Okay,
Faye takes good minutes.
all right. Then in that case, I'd like
Been
to,
here all evening.
I'm sure it's not
But
going
you've
to
been
hurt
enlightened, though, by the conversation.
In that case, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to consider the city manager to enter into an agreement with San Carlos that will transfer electric underground credits to San Carlos and have the credits returned to us with interest, which provides an innovative solution to both accruing additional work credits for the city of Brisbane and for allowing the city of San Carlos to move forward with their project.
Is there a second?
You have any issues, Terry, with it? I don't.
Well, I don't have any specific issues. So, no, not a problem.
All right. So I'll second it.
Okay. You want to discuss something before we vote?
No,
You seem not sure.
given the lateness of the hour, I'm not sure I'm sure on anything, but
Well, that's true for all of us, yeah.
I'm assuming it is giving them credits to do underground work and that we're not going to use.
In the near future.
Yes, they're ready to move.
They're
We're not in position, but we'll get some extra credits down the line, perhaps when we are ready.
The amount of money that, which they want from us is just sort of the marginal thing of what they need, but for us, the amount of money we have is probably one block. So,
Yeah, so
not much we could do. Is that correct?
Council's doing a better job of the staff report than I could, sir.
there you go.
Ooh, it's getting late.
You gotta take matters into your own hands.
Yeah.
At this hour.
Okay, shall we vote?
Call the
Ready?
question.
Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Right?
Opposed? Okay. All right, so A, B, and
Can I take a chance here? I'd like to make a motion to adopt City Resolution Number 2013-27, approving the issuance and sale by the successor agency of the redevelopment agency of the City of Brisbane tax allocation bonds to refinance redevelopment low and moderate income housing activities.
I'm cool with seconding that if,
I think we have a member
yeah,
of
we
the
have
public
some
that wants
comments.
to,
We can still talk about it, yeah, right, yeah.
Still put it on the table, though.
Yeah, right, it just puts that on the table, yeah, right. Any council comment before,
I don't have any.
okay.
well,
You want to say something? Go ahead.
we can hear from the public first.
Okay.
Fine with that.
So I fully understand the need for refinancing at such low interest rates, so please don't patronize me and tell me that we're doing this for that reason. I'm fully understanding it, but refinancing the bonds that were redevelopment agency, it's one of the reasons the redevelopment agencies were disbanded was because those bonds got refinanced and refinanced and refinanced. And these bonds that were 1980, if you hadn't refinanced them every 10 years, it seems roughly, I've been here 28 years, I think this is the third time. It would have been paid off. And so I totally disagree with the statement from the in the staff report that this will save the community $145,000 a year. It will only save that amount for the 15-year life of the existing bond, not now that you're going to extend it an existing 30 years. So I'm also very concerned that right now you're wanting to roll all your debt into one and kind of not keep the funds based on the purpose. So what you're asking here, which I didn't quite hear explained, was to take all the housing financing, all the marina bonds, and I know you guys were trying to include passing bonds for unfunded retirement accounts. And so I really think that this is a very bad accounting practice to take all your funds that have a specific obligation that are connected to specific land and roll them all into one bond. Because if is the situation where there is a bank that's too big to fail, there just might be a bond that's too big for Brisbane. And so, you know, when we financed our house a while back, I said, okay, I want as much as I can to have the federally insured component. And back then, the highest that FDIC would cover was $320,000. So I at least wanted part of my mortgage to be protected for me. And then it was like, well, there's all this back before the personal finance mortgage. I'm sorry, this is so late. I can hardly think and talk at the same time. When mortgage, you know, they raised the limits from $312,000 to $425. But still, the whole thought that if I were to fail on the first for my home, that's it, gone. So if the city of Brisbane encounters financial difficulties in the future, I think you would like to have multiple bonds where you can go, okay, maybe we'll pay this month and this next month, or in some way not have this enormous singular debt hanging over the city. So I disagree with the idea of combining all our debt into one note. And the other thing is that, and I heard this when you guys were talking about the budget, and you either are or aren't passing it tonight. I heard Stuart mention some things about, oh, well, this was handled over here on this account last time, and it's going to be handled over here. And my experiences in doing accounting is you got to be really careful when you start shifting or reclassifying your funds. And I didn't hear anybody say, and I'm going to put the little, you know, those little footnote notation that says, this account was once upon a time called the redevelopment fund, or once upon a time called the housing authority, or once upon a time, and I didn't hear that. And when you were discussing working on your budget, that you wanted there to be any you know, asterisks or any kind of notation that would inform you about how you're shifting your budget right now, because that becomes very difficult for auditors in the future when they try to compare one series of accounts and now they're over here in another area. So I'm really concerned about this. I don't think this is something that I would take so lightly as let's pass it because it's time to pass. I think I would reconsider this. Thank you.
Stuart?
I actually would agree with Dana that if we were extending the bond issue beyond the current date of expiration, that would be a bad idea. But all we're doing is refinancing the bond with the same end date.
Schedule.
So we're not extending it another 30 years. We're going to still end the bonds when the old bonds were due. So from that perspective, we are in fact going to save the $142,000, $145,000 for that duration of the existing bond, and then this bond will end. So if we were to extend it, I would agree with her that that would not be the right analysis, but because we're not extending it, that is the correct analysis.
What about the liability question?
This is all backed by RPTTF funds, so nothing is backed by city revenue. This is the whole issue of the dissolution of the RDA. So by combining the two bond issues, we're able to actually use the full amount of the RPTTF for both bonds. Whereas
spell that out.
Redevelopment Property Tax Trust Fund. So by combining the two, we're able to use the funds for the money that we have available from the RPTTF for both bonds, whereas previously, the way the bond covenants were written for the housing fund, that 20% set aside may not be available to back the 2001 refinance. So in fact, it gives us more money available to pay the two bonds than less.
And the consolidation?
The consolidation.
Of the three separate bond issues?
Well, we're actually not consolidating the pension obligation bonds into here.
No, not the other three. There are three.
So when we originally did the 1984 bond issue, I'm going to go all the way back in history. And it might be actually easier if I just run through the presentation I had set up to try and explain it. So when we did the 1984... I said I was
going to take a chance.
You did say that.
You did treat it was a chance. Let me just I'm sorry.
Motion to extend the meeting until 12:15.
Second.
You know me.
Till tomorrow.
All in favor, say
You know
aye.
me.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. So we're going to refinance the 2001 1998 bonds. As you know, the bonds paid for the marina and the senior housing on Visitation Ave. So the 2001 tab, which is the tax allocation bond that was originally sold for the marina, it was a $14,850,000 bond issue. It was backed by the tax increment from Sierra Point RDA 1. It was backed by the marina revenues, and it was backed by MedLife Insurance Company. So in fact, what happened was we didn't have enough money coming out of the tax increment or the marina revenues to pay the bond off, so MetLife kept on backfilling. So the bond issue kept growing in value, and then in 2001, we actually had a $25 million debt for this. RDA sold $15 million worth of bonds at 12% interest because they had a bond limit of $15 million. So then what happened, to finish off the bond, to finish off the repayment, the city contributed $2 million from the Marina Fund. That's an issue that we've talked about debt still owed from the redevelopment agency to the Marina Fund. The RDA bonds were bought by the city's financing authority and then resold to the public to pay off the debt of the MetLife and the existing bonds. So that's really what we're trying to do tonight, is refinance the 2001 tax allocation bond that would finally clear up all of that issue that we dealt with 1984 and dealt with the MetLife. There's other slides, but I'll stop there.
And the housing part of it too.
Right, and then the housing has that one as well. That we would combine it. We would save $130,000 through the tabs and another $12,000 through the housing fund.
So when you say the community, that really means all the underlying taxing districts.
Correct.
Who are?
We have the Community College District, the Jefferson Union High School District, the Brisbane Elementary School District, the County Free Library, the county, and the city. So they would all split the savings.
I spent a half hour with Stuart on this today, so.
Yeah, no, I've been over this too, but Dana asked some good questions and, you know, they deserve to be answered.
Correct.
So it started out as 14.8 million owed,
Back in 1984.
and because of interest rates and lack of paying it off, we ended up
Owing a lot more.
owing a lot more, but bonding 17, or costing 15 plus 2.
Okay, so what happened was when we sold the $15 million bond for the tax allocation, we sold it at 12% interest rate. We then took the flow of funds that generated, and the city bought that flow of funds. The city then repackaged that flow of funds through the Brisbane Financing Authority with a higher bond amount, because it could sell it at a lower interest rate. I think those bonds are in the 5 to 6% range. So we took a flow of funds and said that can actually generate a bigger bond amount than the 15 million. And the reason we did it in that fashion was the redevelopment agency had a bond cap of 15 million. It couldn't sell more than $15 million worth of bonds back in 2001.
So what do we owe today? What dollar amount are we refinancing, asking to refinance today?
We are refinancing approximately $19 million worth of bonds. There's about 17.8 million left from the BPFA, and there's about 1.1 million left from the housing bond.
I'm sorry, repeat that?
There's about 17.8 million from the Brisbane Financing Authority and about 1.1 from the housing fund.
And that's including the two. But we cut a deal with MetLife.
Now, so what we did was the redevelopment agency sold $15 million worth of bonds at 12% interest, which generated about $1.9 million worth of cash every year. The city bought that $1.9 million worth of cash and sold it packaged another bond for about I think it was about $26 million to the public. And, part of it was expenses and fees and all those things. And that was at a 6% interest rate. So the 1.9 million would cover that bond issue. So the city wasn't paying any money. It was a flow of funds from the RDA to the Brisbane Financing Authority to whoever the bondholders were.
Stuart, though, the answer, in terms of the MetLife issue, MetLife
was paid off.
They were paid off, but they were paid off at a lower amount than
Correct.
what they would have, what they had a right to.
Correct.
We actually did negotiate that down, if memory serves me correctly, about $2 million.
Right.
Could be.
I'm trying to get at is our debt since '84, our debt has been growing. When you look at it in reality, not in...
Sure. From 1984 to 2001, our debt grew. The redevelopment agency did not have enough money to make the annual bond payments.
to pay the 1984 debt.
Wasn't enough development out there.
Right.
Pay
Right.
tax increment.
Right. So MetLife stepped in and paid the bondholders. So our debt grew until 2001. And then in 2001, we did this refinancing method. And since that time, we've been paying down our debt, and our debt has not grown and has in fact decreased since 2001. But yes, between 1984 and 2001, it was growing.
And so we've reduced it from that amount down to about 18.2.
Correct.
Okay.
Still more than what we bonded for in 1984.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
I'll second Clark's motion.
I think you did already.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I did that. I did that yesterday.
Technically, you're right. You have to second it again?
Yeah, I have a nitpicking question on the resolution. Whoops. On page 2, the second whereas the California Supreme Court invalidated the opt-in bill resulting in the Monrovia Redevelopment Agency being dissolved. And then in the next whereas, it says there are assets and obligations of the agency. So, I mean, you could say that the agency, since it's not specified which agency, it refers to the Monrovia Redevelopment Agency. So there's a little confusion there.
Yeah, probably a cut and paste problem for my bond counsel.
Yeah.
That I didn't catch. Oh, was it Monrovia? Oh, that's right. Okay.
They were the,
That was it. Monrovia, Betsy reminds me. Monrovia was the city that sued with the governor's two bills that was to dissolve the agency. Monrovia was the redevelopment agency that had the lead in that lawsuit. So really, the other whereas refers to us, but the Monrovia redevelopment was the lawsuit that split the baby.
That's kind of what I figured.
Yes.
But then in the next whereas, we should make it clear that the agency being referred to is the Brisbane Redevelopment Agency.
Sure, we can say that.
Right, Mr. Attorney? Yeah, okay.
Absolutely.
I said it was a nitpicking thing, but might as well get it right. We are talking about a lot of money. Okay, so we have,
So we're talking about a lot of money, and this bond would not be extended in any time from what we have already.
that's correct.
Correct.
And that is, how much is left on the debt, the years?
I think it comes due in 2028 or 2026. 2028.
Bad when I can't even do the math from that.
15 years. The housing bond would be due 2028.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have motion to approve resolution 2013-27 as slightly modified. And that's been moved and seconded. Ready to vote?
call the question.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Okay, I'm really going to risk it now and consider adoption. I'm going to make a motion to adopt Brisbane Public Financing Authority Resolution Number BPFA 2013-02, authorizing execution and delivery of an escrow agreement in connection with the issuance and sale by the successor agency to the redevelopment agency of the City of Brisbane of tax allocation refunding bonds to refinance redevelopment activities within and for the benefit of the projects of the former redevelopment agency of the City of Brisbane and approving related actions.
I trusted you the last time, Clark, and It didn't work.
You'll
So
second it again?
I'll leave it to Terry this time.
To the redevelopment agency.
Okay, I have the same nitpick on page 2, same problem.
We can make that change.
And it might, and the only thing that's really different in this is the escrow agreement. Be helpful maybe to just quickly explain what that is.
This is the agreement where we would set aside money to pay off the 1998 bonds. So what you do is for bonds that are not available to be called today, you set money aside in escrow agreement and into escrow, so that way when the bonds are available to be called at par, you pay them off out of that escrow account. And that's all done through the trustee.
And the escrow will be held at,
Bank of New York,
right,
who's our trustee for all of our
they've
bonds.
done that for a number of transactions.
Yes.
So, any further questions?
We're still waiting for a second.
You cool, Terry?
Yes. I am still waiting for a second.
Sure, I'll second it.
Okay. Any further discussion?
Call the question.
All in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye? Okay. So if I understood, so what we should probably do is adjourn this meeting, as we said, in memory of Steve Waldo, and then move on to the successor agency.
Do we need to do oral communications number 2? Is that a requirement?
No?
Okay.
Unless there's a, it's okay? All right. Okay, so do we need to do that by motion, or can I just say so? The adjournment and moving on to the successor agency.
You can state that the meeting is adjourned and move on to the successor agency.
Okay, so I just did that. Important to note that in memory of Steve Waldo. Okay, successor agency. New hats.
Okay.
So there are two things we need to do here.
There's
I guess because
three.
both come before the Oversight Board on Wednesday, I believe. One is the annual budget. Right, Stuart?
Correct?
Any questions on that?
Motion to approve resolution number SA 2013-02, adopting the annual budget for the fiscal year 2013-14 and making appropriations for the amounts budgeted.
I'll move to second.
Okay. Now, it says in here, a public hearing is supposed to have been held. So should I go through the motions on that? It's a second whereas.
Oh, you know,
Mayor, I believe it would be advisable to just open the public hearing, ask if any public wants to comment, and then close the public hearing.
All right. The public hearing is open. There are two members of the public still here, believe it or not. One of them got kind of stuck.
Motion to close public.
we also,
Your ride.
Sherry, you also have to change the date of the resolution.
Okay, so
Motion to close public
not
hearing.
hearing any requests to speak.
Second.
Moved and seconded to close the public hearing. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Now I'll make my motion.
No, the motion's already on the table.
Okay, now we got a motion and a second. I think you made the second, right? Yeah.
Call the question.
So all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, so the second is the refinancing. So you want to, what should we know
This is like a redo.
Well, this
The
is
redo, but
the,
it's slightly different.
this is the Brisbane successor agency's most action to refinance the bonds that the
the successor agency has outstanding. So that's the 2001A and the 1998. So, and it's just the continuation of the same action as you took as a city, but this is the successor agency taking those actions.
Okay, motion to adopt resolution number SA 2013-04, authorizing the issuance and sale of tax allocation refunding bonds to refinance redevelopment low and moderate income housing activities within and for the benefit of the projects of the former RDA of the City of Brisbane and approving related documents and actions.
Second.
May I ask a question of staff?
Of course.
This is not incurring new debt, this is just the transfer of prior debt
Correct.
and refinancing it?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
So it's basically, the question that I had that I would appreciate it being on the record anyway was, you know, why we dealt with any of this in the city agenda rather than having it all under the agenda of the successor agency, because in effect, it's all really successor agency debt.
The underlying debt is in fact successor agency debt, but the Brisbane Financing Authority debt is City of Brisbane is the city's debt. So the Brisbane Financing Authority is a separate entity that the city council sits as the head of. So when you took that motion, you were actually taking it as the Brisbane Financing Authority, not as the city council. So it's the different levels of the debt that you need to take action as both entities. Not working.
Well, I mean, and I raised this issue earlier during the day, and you said this is what the bond council recommended.
Right.
But but there's a lot of statements made in here that, you know, none of this debt is the obligation of the city per se. It's the obligation of the successor agency, because it's all in effect redevelopment debt.
Correct. But the Brisbane...
Therefore, the statement you make about the Brisbane Financing Authority makes me a little nervous.
So we are paying off, so the Brisbane Financing Authority held the debt of the redevelopment agency. The Brisbane Financing Authority then paid outside bondholders. So this debt that the successor agency is going to do, is going to sell, is going to be sold directly to the public. And it will pay off the Brisbane Financing Authority's debt. So you had to take action as a city council to deal with the Brisbane Financing Authority's debt.
So then the debt will be eliminated from
The Brisbane Financing
Authority.
Authority, and it's all going to be the successor agency debt.
successor
And I understand that's where the confusion is coming.
Right.
But the confusion is because of the way that we needed to do the 2001 bond issue in order to have enough cash to pay off the existing bondholders and MetLife. So this is all trying to clean up the 19, you know, in reality,
I understand what we're doing. What's really in the back of my mind is what some of the people who sit on the oversight panel are going to make of this. And I just want to make sure that they don't make something of it that we don't want to have happen. And so that's why I'm raising this issue, and because, you know, there's at least one member of that oversight panel who will, if there's anything that they can raise a question about, they will. And I just want to make sure we've got all of our teeth clean.
correct. What I can do is contact our bond counsel to give a better written explanation, or perhaps be there in person to explain the process that we're doing.
Okay. Makes me feel a little better.
Okay.
Just a little. Call the question.
Okay, so we have resolution SA, as you said, 2013-4. Any further? Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Move adoption of the minutes, successor agency minutes of April 15th, 2013.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. We did it?
Made it out before 12:15, yeah. Good job, Ray.